Hello there, Pisces. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This report, this forecast for our upcoming full moon in Pisces, in honor of you, Pisces, this report is going to be available on all the platforms that Catalyst Energy posts on. So welcome. Thank you for being here. If this is your first time at this channel, thank you for stopping by and taking the time to check it out. It really means a lot when you hit the like button. If you find value here, to subscribe to the channel and certainly to comment and share. So Pisces Sun, Pisces Moon, Pisces Rising, anyone with strong Pisces, if you're really into astrology and you know you have some strong progressions that are Pisces related, there's going to be some measure of information and guidance here in this full moon forecast. So Pisces, you and Virgo, of course, are the main stars of this month's lunar cycle. We had a new moon in Virgo, and our full moon in Pisces is going to be on the 10th of September, which is 2022, early in the morning here on the east coast of the United States. So even earlier in the morning, as you move west across the continent and certainly on the other side of the pond, we're looking at, late morning into the afternoon. But either way, whether you get to see a full view of it or not, it's still going to be really strong. So we're going to take a little journey here through the second half of this lunar cycle, the full moon, this culmination point, and look at some of the highlights for the Pisces people as we move on to not only the end of this lunar cycle from this culminating point of a full moon, but we will be moving through the equinox point during this time, and our next new moon is going to be in Libra on the 25th of September. And so, just like August, it seemed to be over in a flash, and September seems to be no different either. It is just cruising by. And in some ways, it's really easy to just kind of let yourself go, especially as a Pisces, and let the flow of this whole situation from top to bottom just take you away, right? To just surrender into it. And Neptune in your sign for many years now, but certainly where it's at right now, we'll look at those connections throughout the week. And just in general, Neptune in your sign, holding it down, and certainly in the first house for Pisces rising people, it is really easy to do this. And that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but what you are going to find, Pisces, and we're all going to experience on some level this great reveal with this full moon in Pisces, based on the position of the sun in Virgo. And the big reveal is about this really dramatic event that brings the audience and the performers all together into one singular experience. So in the Sabian symbol land, it often is like the original interpretation and the original symbol that was intuited by Elsie Wheeler is, a giant tent, and there is this great performance going on inside of it. So it has been likened to like the revivalist tent, or I often will think about it as a circus tent, right? Where there is the ringleader, there's all the performances, there's the audience, and it's the full experience in a public way of everyone's best coming and creating a feeling-based experience of cohesion and community, right? And Pisces is also all of the karma that comes along with it. So this full moon truly is a reveal, not so much of any unmasking necessarily, but is wherever you find Virgo. So for you, Pisces in particular, this is going to be the land of relationship. And if you take a look at this chart, Pisces, especially for the Pisces rising, you're going to see that up until very recently, all the action has been in the bottom of the chart. The first through sixth houses in astrology are individual consciousness areas of growth and evolution. So it's about individual identity and expression of the subjective I am. And which has been very interesting, I think, for the Pisces person, especially with Neptune in your sign, that has allowed the borders and the boundaries of your own identity be so fluid and in some cases maybe even non-existent, that the collective unconscious karmic flow of things, which is normally Pisces in the 12th house, right? The astral realms, the world of the Akashic records, the ending of a cycle and all the karma that comes with it. It's very easy for the Pisces person, especially with Neptune being here for years now, to just identify completely with this entire process at that level. So artistically, imagination, a sense of fantasy land and dreamland, and also just tapping into that real, not altruistic, but just true compassion, true brotherhood, sisterhood, a sense of human and humanity as a feeling-based experience, and very spiritual, very transcendental. So it's been very easy, I think, for the Pisces person. And like I said, all of the action has been at the bottom of your chart, with the exception of Saturn in your 12th house, right? So that's not even seen, but definitely is some sort of like stick in the ground, or in this case, a force field in this realm of the astral for you, right? Aquarius is your 6th house. And Pluto moving through your 11th house of the social environment as a whole that you are part of. Other than that, and of course the south node of the moon moving through these areas, especially since before 2020, moving through all of the areas of Aquarius through Capricorn, Sag, and now in Scorpio. So there's been a lot of these old past soul resonances and frequencies and vibrations of what has been experienced and what is brought out in our soul experience as a result of truly the North Node, right? And where it's taking us, right? It's inevitable that when the dragon is heading towards something, its tail is going with it, but its direction is opposite. And it's really the momentum of the tail that is like the rudder, right? Pushing forward, or the sway back and forth, but is truly where we've headed from. And so I bring all of this up because it's only been recently since Mercury, the Sun, and now Venus. Venus that rules Libra, Venus that rules Taurus. These are connections we're going to make in this forecast for the Pisces people. It's now starting to turn on about the social identity. And as the relationship and as you in the relationship, Pisces, so is you. So are you, right? There's no way to get around this. So the people that have been entirely passive and completely taken over by more of a illusion oriented, because it's all there in Pisces, isn't it? And Neptune is the great dissolver, the universal solvent. Everything it touches, it just turns to water. But you are already that in your identity, how you feel, your creative expression of self, if you're a sun in Pisces. So it hasn't been that difficult, but it's going to be now. The relationship, the social expression, what is it all for, right? I mean, you could easily just give yourself over, but that becomes the martyr, right? Or that becomes, just living in false reality. That becomes living in illusion, and not knowing the difference, not caring. And that also can mean getting really caught up in the necessity to, especially with Neptune here, to really do whatever it needs to be done to be, to allow that solvent to basically dissolve your own identity away. The thing is now that we're in Virgo, and this is the case every year, right? The sun comes into Virgo opposite you, Pisces, but Mercury retrograde as of this full moon, moving back into Virgo. Venus now in Virgo. She's going to be making connections, really strong connections over here to your 3rd house, Taurus, the North Node, Uranus, right? And she is now in Virgo in the 7th house for the Pisces person. This is all about relationship, and this is all about who you are in relationship. So how you feel in yourself, about yourself, the Pisces stuff that you identify with. It's the big reveal is really coming down to who you are, Pisces, and will be directly, diametrically opposed, as is every full moon, by your identification with the form of relationship and who you are in that relationship. And Venus is very sensitive in the 7th house to the form of the relationship itself, right? And there's a lot of meaning, value, worth. And in case of Virgo, I mean, there is a strong dedication. There's this priestess type of energy, this committed feminine as mother, right? The Queen of Pentacles or something to that effect is in Venus, or in Venus is in Virgo now. So it's and Mercury's already been through Virgo, analyzing, right? Really problem solving, learning a lot from the relationships, using your intuition, and is now moved into the 8th, where Mercury as an archetype is the shepherd of souls, right? It's the messenger, and is even able to enter that space of the underworld, which strangely enough for Pisces is characterized by Libra, right? The balance, the equilibrium in material form. That's very interesting. Pisces, right? I mean, the realm of the depth psychology and the subconscious is about having to take a stand in relation to anything you're in relationship with, which a Pisces person is so more likely not wanting to do, but that's where the darkness really reveals itself. So Mercury is just now starting to move into this area, and the 8th house doesn't necessarily have to be your own subconscious and your own shadow. It's about power dynamics and return on investment, and the energy of any type of relationship and what it actually produces. So that's based on any kind of communion, cooperation, whether it's conscious or not, right? This is the realm of magic, right? Occult energy is really generated and tapped into in the 8th house. And so that's why power dynamics are the name of the game. Death, sex, and taxes is the 8th house. So Mercury's just now kind of going into this space and starting to really use that discernment about the relationships, learning a lot from the relationships, taking the information and organizing it about relationship, who you are in relationship, right? You have got to have boundaries in your relationships, Pisces, to really maximize the potential of being a Pisces. So this is going to reveal so much of that for you at this full moon. So culminating point, right? It's just a full illumination of what is normally something that is deeply felt, but not really reflected consciously back to us. So and what are you following and identifying with what is the inner guidance based on the nature of this relationship, right? And I think that for all of us, this reveal is going to be like, is this for you a relationship, but wherever we are identifying with that sense of patience and maturing and ripening, is the inner guidance that we are identifying and expressing? Maybe is it allowing for, how does that feel to us? Big reveal for all of us, but for you, Pisces, big reveal about where you probably haven't had boundaries, or you've had too many boundaries, or you've had bullshit boundaries, right? Or truly, if you have just been engaged with the perfection of form for your own sake, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is about to be shown to us. And so for those Pisces people that have been utilizing their relationships for their own gain, which is the very dark side of the Virgo energy, because it's so dedicated and so masterful and perfected, but it is not for, service oriented. It's service to self, right? And so for those who have been service to self, I mean, it's gonna just be really obvious at this point. So the trick for the Pisces, especially the Starseed on mission people, is, not only having this big reveal, but what are you going to do from there? And this is what the rest of the cycle is really going to be about, the 2 weeks. And of course, leading up to the equinox as well. So Venus, like I said, she rules your 8th house. She rules the 3rd house, and is going to have a Earth trine to the North Node and Uranus during this time. And so Venus is in the fields. And for you in particular, she rules houses that have to do with the conscious mind and your nervous system and learning and language and communication and your consciousness, as well as the realms of sharing and cooperation and communion and power. And oftentimes we will embody a lot of wherever Venus is and what's going on with her, especially in our body. But I think for you in particular, just really starting to tap into the changes of consciousness that are, inevitable with Uranus and Taurus, especially in the retrograde right now. There's kinetic energy moving under the surface. There's seismic shifting under the surface right now. If you've been tracking any of like the seismic activity, there's some big quakes that have happened, especially in the southern hemisphere over the last week, like 6 and 7. And there was a fairly sizable 5 to 6 one in Iceland just today that is, strangely enough, is about to, send off volcano warnings. And actually the degree of the sun at 16 to 17 degrees, because I'm recording this on the 8th right now, is about a volcanic eruption. So even just leading up to that, you can feel that there's stuff moving around. There's kinetic energy. There are sudden shifts and changes in the landscape of your own mind, that is really, and you're really being pulled in many ways to embrace this idea that, the old traditions, not everything about the old traditions are going to confirm the new places that you're going, right? There's a sense of having to leave behind that which is needed to be left behind, right? And move into new territory. And, this again requires, Pisces, for you to be present in life. And it's been necessary, and in fact has been, very supported for a while now for you to be really kind of either completely immersed in your own process, which I think is amazing. But now you can see that there's energy that's starting to bring you out of it. And this full moon is going to be like, whoa, or if you've been doing your work, you're like, yep, I knew it. And now there is confirmation. I feel it. It's illuminated in my very self, my identity, that this was the right course of action all along. So you might just get confirmation of something, Pisces. So, full moon, early Saturday the 10th. Now, we have to definitely talk about September 11th, of course. I mean, even if you're not in the U.S., this was a huge marker for a lot of where we were going. I feel like that this time frame would have, had we not experienced what we did, maybe it was necessary, right? That waking up. I've heard that theory, or that hypothesis, I guess, as well, that part of that rite and that ritual, for whatever reason, it wasn't always necessarily. Some people hypothesize or have the thought process that was meant to wake up humanity otherwise. But we got the Patriot Act and after that, so I'm not really too sure about that. I have no idea. But we will talk about the astrology for this year's, because I think it's really, these cycles are always coming back around. So it's definitely worth time, because speaking of Uranus and that kinetic energy, the sun is going to be trine Uranus on September 11th. And so this is oftentimes a really great type of astrological transit to have these two in a trine. Now, Uranus rules Aquarius, the sun rules Leo, so normally they're opposed to each other in the way that their energies express, right? They're in oppositional energy, but they're both in an earth sign and in a trine to each other. This is, I think, either stabilizing that. Now, this is exactly where the sun was on September 11th, 2001. Of course, it was 18 and 19 degrees Virgo. This is about this. It's the Sabian symbol is interesting. It's a swimming race, and the idea is that everybody has trained and conditioned themselves to be part of this larger group that is working towards a common goal. And you're not competing against each other as much as emulating each other, being motivated by each other. But you're just starting in the last half of Virgo in general. It is time for the education based on the characterization of your own commitment to self. Now it's time to the adept to really be trained in terms of what they're putting this towards. And the swimming race is really about that, the emulation, instead of competition with each other, to be motivated by each other. Now it's interesting to consider what happened on September 11th, 2001 as this kind of swimming race, but at the same time, the fact that it is in a trine to Uranus here as well, in its retrograde, it's like you may not know necessarily exactly, all of those shifts that are under the surface of your own consciousness, Pisces, with Uranus retrograde and the north node of the moon right now pulling you in this direction, and without a lot of often very conscious awareness. I think the full moon is going to be that moment of like, oh, I see that now. And truly it's in a sextile, at the full moon will be in a sextile within 3 degrees or 2 degrees of this lunar north node, right? Rahu. So there's definitely a connection to that as well in terms of where we're going. So oftentimes, though, this is a pretty favorable type of transit because it allows for like new friends to be made. Like you're kind of innovating and thinking and feeling, expressing yourself outside of the normal conventional boundaries, and in an earth sign, especially with the consciousness coming into the 7th house of relationship for Pisces people. I mean, this, you may not know exactly what's happening, but there's this sense here, this really strong, like, really strong sovereign identification with we are, moving towards something that is benefiting all of us. And we may not know exactly how it's going to unfold. And we may not, we may not even win the competition necessarily, but we are all acting at our best to get somewhere. Now, one of the real basic ways to consider this is, the sperm moving towards the ovum, right? They're all working together for the same goal, but they all have their own individual motivation to get there as well for even a bigger goal. So that's something to consider as well. So Pisces, this is, I feel like it's very, it gives you a direction and a way to identify your work and your relationships, whatever they are. They can be your marriage and your spouse, your domestic partnership, right? Your children, your clients, your customers, you and your boss, right? You and your business partner, you and your, any loved one, close friend. It's really about the nature of the relationship when you interact with other. Right? I feel like it gives something to work toward, even though there's a sense of like, I don't know what's happening, right? And if you're part of the Reiki attunements that are happening right now, then you'll see that today's attunement, which was day 8, on the 8th of September, really had a lot of this energy of like, there's transformation, there's metamorphosis that's really coming. And there's a lot to give to begin with. So seeing, even when things aren't really clear or really struggling to really trust your gut or your inner voice about it, this at the very least is like, okay, I'm working towards something. This relationship is more than just what I seem to be personally getting out of it. It's way bigger, and to give yourself this time and energy to and this stabilization, right, with something that is not ever stable, which is Uranus. So that's something to consider as well. So, and I know there's just so much baggage attached to this date, and certainly in 2001, and the fact this is where the sun was, it's coming around. It's the solar return. But things are different now. There are things that are different now, and I'm going to talk about those differences actually on the Friday broadcast, which is the 9th of September, and it'll be on this channel, either live on YouTube or the replay will be uploaded if you're on the other platforms. So that's the 11th, which is Sunday, right? So I'm sure, there's all kinds of things that are going on that day as well. So, but for Pisces, it's really about coming, starting to really personalize. And I say that because you have the sun, you have Mercury, and you have Venus, especially in now the 7th and 8th houses, to start addressing social identity in much more of a direct way. And something may need to change, right? Something may be drastically revealed, or chances are that it's something you've already Pisces, you've already known. You've known for a long time. It's now being really reflected strongly into who you are. Or that is being reflected subjectively in your own feels about yourself. Right. So that's the 11th. Now, let's get an idea here of what to expect as we move forward. So Okay, so Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we're going to see Lilith involved. So she's retrograde, and I made a comment that I have to retract because I was just wrong. I was like, I think we're done with Lilith in Cancer. We are certainly not done with Black Moon Lilith in Cancer. The true Lilith, the oscillating lunar apogee, is going right back into Cancer and will be opposite Pluto, will be in a trine to Neptune. And so we want to look at those things throughout next week for the Pisces person, because those are all Procyon stories with Lilith. So if you know you have Procyon starseed markings, and we've been working with it in the Catalyst classroom and certainly in the individual readings, then this is going to be relevant for you. So let's see here. Oops. So you can see here, let's go back. I want you to see the opposition with Pluto, because this is just something that has continued to come back around. And this is why we talked about it last month with Black Moon Lilith as the theme of the Catalyst classroom, because it was going to be continuing to move back and forth over this spot for quite a while, and opposite Pluto, right? This is where Pluto is, opposite Procyon. So this has just been a thorn in everyone's side. And of course, this is the natal Pluto position of the United States chart, speaking of which. So that's been an extra interesting point of reference for a lot of these transits and these transit readings. And Procyon, right? The story of Procyon, and of course, how it's directly connected to the Pleiades in a lot of ways, and that's something that we would talk about in the Catalyst classroom and in our Starseed Fellowship, because that's way more relevant to those types of containers. I can't really get into it here, but what I will say is that Lilith in the 5th, Pluto in the 11th, right? And so this opposition between your own voice, Pisces, and a sense of primal power and connection to the divine feminine archetype, coming through the voice, right? Coming through your sense of creative expression, your passion, your joy, your thrill, your optimism. The way that you creatively express yourself is the 5th house. And so with this opposition to Pluto, right, this is a power struggle if I've ever seen one. And it's continued, right? Because Lilith is powerful and Pluto is the agent of death, destruction, and transformation. And so one is like the dark void that we all must maintain in order for the light of, the flame of divinity to be able to inhabit. And a lot of times we will resist this or feel cut off and kind of turn the dial up to 11 on this and get very much into the power dynamics within ourselves, or we will do the opposite, right? We will outsource it to its opposite sign. And I think that this is something to consider about your voice, Pisces, versus what is clearly like the demolition at a social level. And when I say social level, certainly we are talking about 10th house things because it's Capricorn, so the actual institutions. But for you, it's like the cohesion of your social networks in general, your community, right? The human element of your society is what is going through demolition and is in this fallow, kind of empty period, and will come back into active, metamorphosis. And again, here is that death card in the Reiki attunement for today if you're part of that group. So just coming into the week, Pisces, just know that this is going to be brought up in these areas of your voice and the community that your voice is a part of. And it's very difficult to not lose your voice when it seems like the entire community that you're part of is going through demolition, right? Or you can get on the other side of it, Pisces, and get really darkly empowered in this area as well, because it's a way to compensate for what is being destroyed at this level. So just, whatever your 5th house is, or whatever that expression is, it's really in the feels, right? Because it's Cancer, and it's a sense of protection and a sense of boundary. So here comes those boundaries again, and how even expressing boundaries and nurturing and those types of Cancerian energies, how you may go into the extreme of it as a means to maintain boundaries of your own voice, while the voice of the collective is just for your collective, right? Whatever that is for you is going through its demolition, right? But that also means that if you can really let go of the need to feel this and really tap into, the way that space is created, then I see that as being an incredibly powerful resonance that will bypass, really. And isn't that the Procyon story? If you know what I'm talking about, you'll know what I mean. How deeply powerful it was to be for those to be pushed underground for survival, right? Which is, I think, Pisces, you may have felt that way in your own voice. And there was a reason. There's a really important reason, but you don't want to stay stuck down there. You want to hone it for the sake of the archetype of the divine feminine is truly what Lilith represents, and is the Cancer element being so connected to your own passions and your own expression. So again, boundaries are important, but you don't want to have your boundaries so consolidated that you can't allow for some tenderness, some connection, some re-establishment of what this resonance is. Okay. That's really important to consider. And then, like I said, Lilith will have this sextile during this week as well to Neptune, or trine to Neptune. So again, Pisces, your agent, right? You is the great dissolver. Neptune in your sign. And a trine to here, though, is it's a very stable emotional energy, right? It's you really grok at the essence of who you are, that you are being purified and going through this catharsis as much as everyone else is. And there's something incredibly emotionally stabilizing about that. In some ways, it's like when you allow that ego to just be washed over and dissolved, it almost is like the thing that creates the space in order for you to really tap into your passions, your joy, your children, right? Maybe you are a mother or a nurturer, and that is your joy as a Pisces rising. To allow just to wash over like within you, as a means to create that space. I think that is a really important message for Pisces this week. Okay. So when we come into next weekend, it really wakes back up again, right? So when we are in the period from the full moon to the last quarter moon, so in the third lunar quarter itself, right? It's really about learning to integrate the polarity that we have had illuminated for us with the full moon. And it's a polarity within ourselves, the sun and the moon, in opposition to each other. So it's polarity upon polarity upon polarity. It's about integrating it. So this is what the week will really lead to. So when we get to the weekend, Pisces, this is where it really heats up again, okay? I think that's my read on it, at least. So when we get into Wednesday, Thursday, we get into the 16th, you can see how busy this chart really is. We're going to have Venus in a square to Mars. Okay, well, that's pretty standard in terms of Venus square Mars, and they're immutable signs, which means there's a lot of malleability, but there's also a lot of flexibility and mutability, right, in order to shift and change, which is kind of good for Venus and Mars to be squaring off, right, that there is, and they're both signs that are ruled by Mercury. So you have straight intellectual knowledge, and then you have Virgo, which is adding the discernment and the intuition to analyze that, to bring and blend the dialectic that allows us to even have this level of consciousness at all. It's in the process of this or that, off and on, 1 and 0, right? The binary, black and white, without the recognition of that through our consciousness, the separation. We don't have the opportunity to then learn how to integrate it. And that is a big secret, right? To balance in the universe. So this square, again, you're going to see Venus in your 7th house, right? This sensitivity, this kind of devotion to being service-oriented, maybe the value and the warmth and the meaning to your relationships in terms of and the way that you want to commit to them has gotten really stronger. And the square to Mars, though, now Mars in Gemini is going to be here for a hot minute, right? It's going to get all the way up to the end, like 28 degrees or so, and station retrograde. So this has been the time where the fomenting of real struggle with that output, penetrating warrior energy of Mars, right? The instinctual drive for self-preservation acting. It's that spark. This has been the time where that struggle has been fomented. And when you are stuck in the feedback loop of, this or that, 1 and 0, on and off, black and white, then, you can get a lot of energy, but where does it go? It just stays in the loop, right, with Mars. And so this square, as much as... And the thing to consider about the square, first of all, is besides the fact that you have 4th house, home, family, personal power, right? The sense of, stabilization, your root system, and home and family of origin, right? Your home, your current home, as if in like your partner, your spouse, and your children, whatever the home life is, and the home life that you grew up in, right? And the emotional nature of it is where your character develops, right? Still talking about individual expression, but it is about feelings. It's about where we feel we belong, where we feel safe in the 4th house, who our family is, and who we are in relation to that, and in relation to the world around us. So self-esteem is a big part of the 4th house, and inner power, and your personal life. So the moon and Mars conjunct here for you, Pisces, in a square to Venus. Okay, so in Virgo. So there's still some elements that you're feeling drawn into objectively pursuing in these areas of where your root system is, right? This is going deep into the root system. And with Mars here, you can really find a battle with those that you are close to in that type of environment. You may find a lot of push and pull. There may be, but there's also a really strong drive to get to the bottom of things, to really deepen, to put that energy towards something that, yes, it's instinctual. Yes, it's assertive. And when you create waves in this area where your emotional security resides, that can impact your emotional security. But there's something here that the moon and Mars together is there's a sensitivity here in the 4th house for Pisces that is like, hey, we really need to be objective about this. And there's a certain amount of passivity with Venus in Virgo at this degree, and it's not a bad thing. It's about receiving some type of symbol, some type of representation of the fact that you're on the right track, right? This is also specifically where Venus is at 14 to 15 degrees Virgo. This is a Syrian starseed marking too. So it's in a sextile to Sirius. So the square here, this mutable square, Venus and Mars, right? The feminine and the masculine, right? The seed and the soil in a square, right? And that would be part of like planting the seed in a lot of ways. Again, there's a sense of objectivity here and a sensitivity to this area of I need to make sure and acting on, like talking, right? There's a communication, there's an emotional communication that is really happening here that, Mars is digging down deeper, and in some ways the moon element here is able to really sink into this area. It's truly very sensitive to your inner feels here, but Venus is like, it's not just there, right? I mean, there's a sensitivity here in your sense of value and warmth and sharing, and a sense of your physical feels, right? The actual energy in your body and the way you feel the dynamics in your relationship, if it's balanced or not. That's part of the equation as well. And again, this is something that I think Pisces, it's really easy to get into the deep sensitivity of what you are feeling and acting on it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's about finding this objective kind of, let's talk about it, let's interact. But it's still within yourself. And this square is just like, hey, you still have to actually also feel into the nature of the relationship in and of itself. It's not all everything down here in the fourth house. Just remember that. Now, at the same time, Venus, this is when she starts making connections to the North Node in a strong way. This is a Earth trine. And soon after that, she's going to be in a trine to Uranus. So she rules also this house as well. So she's out of her rulership, but there is a familiarity here, a kind of a, hey, it may be a struggle in terms of that action-oriented, assertive, forward momentum of Mars, and even emotion, because you're like, I know, I feel, I'm very sensitive to this kind of objective process, right, of talking and like objectively clarifying the things that I'm feeling within myself, right? You might get pulled really into that and really want to act on that. But Venus, this trine here is so great. First with the North Node, right, that there is, we're having to start really braving the storm. And braving the storm within your own mind. So again, allowing what is, beautiful in these relationships, whatever they are, the things that are reaching your level of physical awareness to stabilize what may be really difficult to cognitively understand because it's at a soul level, but it is pulling you to brave a storm, right? A mental storm, a storm of your own consciousness. Wow. And then you see that Sun is going to come into an opposition with Neptune. Boy, oh boy, here we go again, right? Here's this big opposition to you and who you are in relationship. And truly, this is about what is it going to take, identifying you with the idea of, a true culture hero. And I'm not saying it has to be like fully. I'm talking about, full service to the relationship as a whole, in opposition to you just like completely just, again, the great solvent of Neptune to your very identity. And the opposition is going to pull you back into, hello, you're still in a relationship with life over here, Pisces, and identifying exactly the steps, that have been taken and where it's led to this kind of flag at half-mast. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if we see, they just announced today on social media about the Queen of England and being under medical observation. I would not even be remotely surprised. I'm not predicting that, and I wouldn't be surprised either if it didn't happen. But I just got to really because the flag at half-mast is what we do when someone dies or passes away that has been a true service to the community. And that's what it's like kind of the ideal state for Virgo in a lot of ways, is to get to that point where your memory lives on and your service is collectively valued. So, but it does show this level of letting go and an acknowledgement of what has been given and surrendered over to the whole or to the relationship. So again, by next weekend, it's going to turn all back on, Pisces. And so I hope that you take advantage of the week of really just as the moon moves through your first, second, third, and into your fourth house, and Lilith in your fifth house, like really holding it down in terms of your voice and your passion and your joy, and really what gets you, your heart is opening, is really, really important, because, once the moon comes into Cancer, it's, again, then you're going to really be feeling it. So that also means that the moon is going to be squaring the sun. This is a third quarter moon on the 17th. Again, another mutable square with the sun in Virgo and the moon in Gemini. So again, both Mercury ruled, and Mercury is well on its way, is fully into its retrograde by this point. It is now moving back towards the point where it's going to have a conjunction with the sun on the equinox at 0 degrees Libra. So the kind of internalized review process now in these darker corners of your own subconscious, of the power dynamics in your relationships, right? There's a lot here to face, right? You get to the bottom of the truth in the 8th house, and for better or for worse, right? You have to contend with the raw essence of the energy created there. So Mercury in its retrograde, it's such an awesome opportunity, Pisces, to really start digging, to just doing that inner reevaluation around those themes in your own life. As you know, there's this square here with the moon that's in the fourth house, and truly what's in the fourth house is going to have a direct impact on what is in the eighth house, because the fourth house is your feels, right? And so your feels square this moon. I mean, I have a sense that there's always a reorientation with this third quarter moon. It's a crisis of our own consciousness, right? You know, we feel this necessity into pruning something within our own feels, our own root system, a sense of cutting back what is extraneous in these root systems. Maybe the roots have to be cut back. Maybe there's a transplanting that literally needs to be happening, right? Where you're pulling the roots out and putting them somewhere else. But the pruning aspect seems, regardless, cutting away what is unnecessary anymore, and a sensitivity to that without a full picture of it, with this third quarter moon, again, in the house of relationship, also in this area of, it's still in opposition, right? And I mean, let's be honest here, we're looking at a T-square with the sun-moon opposition. And so it's in this pruning process within your own inner private personal power that I think, and the way you feel, right? And the feels that are in this area, and using your feelings, right? This is like going blind in an area that you're like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but, you know, I'm going to cut back and use, use my intuitive sense to cut back what is unnecessary here, while the very nature of who I am and who I am in relationship is being, pulled on either side right now, and can be, again, very confusing or very illuminating. Sun opposite Neptune is kind of one of those dynamics of like your own ego in a lot of ways, right? Your creative, outgoing ego consciousness in opposition to just, the solvent, right, of the entire cosmos. Even the sun is subject to the one source, right? I mean, that's where it came from. And so, again, establishing boundaries, or even acknowledging that there is a physicality that is meant to be integrated with this source of all, is really important. And that it could be you could just let go of yourself so easily, especially in these degrees. Oh my gosh, into what has happened. But this is about taking some responsibility and taking some ownership in some ways about your identifying with your relationships, right? And it's going to be something about what needs to be cut back in these areas of your own personal feels that's going to have a big impact on that. And you're going to have to start rearranging yourself from the inside out from this point on as we go into our balsamic moon. So this is the first third quarter moon. So as we move through the areas leading, oh my God, there's so much, leading up to the equinox, which is going to be the 22nd. So the 18th of September, right? The sun and Pluto are in a trine. We've talked about the necessity for finding a sense of refinement with the cultural practices. We talk about this in terms of like the Japanese have very specific ceremonial structures and formats across the board, right, for their practices. And you are tapping into not just your own form, but something that has been in form for generations, which means you're tapping into the energy. And it may seem ceremonial, and it may seem like it's removed because you're just following the steps, but it's not. You're tapping into something more at that moment. And I think that a trine to Pluto at that point is just like, hey, the entire social network may be going through demolition for the Pisces person, right? The nature of the society that you thought you belonged to but in your one-on-one relationship, who you are in relationship, and really trusting, right, this format that you finally maybe have come to realize, represents the root system that you want to be identified with. It actually allows you to grow and ripen, right? So there may, this also could be just a recognition with this earth trine. It's not necessarily good because it's in harmony. It may be still tapped into the refined root system of everything that is falling away. And that's going to have its own impact on people, especially if they're overly identified with the relationship and not working on any of the stuff around themselves during this time. So the 17th and the 18th, also the 18th is where the 18th and the 19th, we're going to see Mercury in its second opposition to Jupiter, 8th and 2nd house. This is the first real transit, Pisces, that we've talked about, other than like the moon connections over this time, where your 2nd house is getting brought into the fold. And this is going to be more relevant coming next month for Pisces, because with Libra and Mercury and the Sun and soon Venus in her home sign of Libra, it's going to be in opposition to all this Aries energy with Chiron and Jupiter. So the the houses and areas of resources and shared resources are going to become way more salient for the Pisces person in September to October. And that can have certainly have a lot of different meanings. I think that resource in general may have felt like it's starting to shrink, or certainly the full idea in terms of resource pattern is starting to contract with Jupiter retrograde, Chiron as well. There's contraction with the retrograde too in terms of resources. So, it is really tightening the belt in a lot of ways. And this opposition with Jupiter was part of this mystic rectangle not that long ago. So now they're both retrograde, moving in the 2nd and 8th house. And so this opposition, again, where the mind is now kind of reviewing, like, well, what is that hidden knowledge? Like, what is that transmission? How am I internally making sense of this, finding the patterns of the transmission of the wisdom, right? I mean, the beginning of Libra is really starting to learn about and then apply eventually the wisdom of equilibrium and balance. And so part of that is receiving it from the guru or whoever. And the retrograde is really a proofreading time, and a deeper look at what this is in opposition to Jupiter in the 2nd house. That is really, there's a new dimension of meaning in this area, and a new dimension of like the overall belief, or a new and truly with Jupiter in the 2nd house, just in general, I mean, there's a lot of luck and good fortune with Jupiter in the 2nd when it comes to resources and managing them. So there's something here about this opposition being really important to making sure that you the transmission that you about balance and equilibrium in terms of shared resources, maybe going back over it. And the opposition to Jupiter is like, is this really, is this really going to take me to this new dimension of being in the way that I experience my own resources, right? And it's both of these are contracting, and you're talking about the mind and the understanding, both in a fire and an air sign. So that's the second of 3 passes. We talked about the Sun and Pluto. You can see that the Moon and Lilith, they're all in conjunction with Sirius, and they're making a connection to the Moon's North Node. Wow, the nodal axis, which is getting into actually now territory of Andromeda. What a great time to start looking at Andromeda in terms of starseed connection, because the constellation itself actually spans about 30 degrees from 14 Aries to 14 Taurus. And so the nodes move in a natural retrograde. They move naturally clockwise around where everything else moves counterclockwise. So it's coming into territory of Andromeda now. That's really exciting. So, and then the Moon connected to Sirius, making these connections, really strong, harmonious balance connections to the nodes of the moon. I feel like there's a big starseed awakening here and a tapping in, again, for you Pisces in particular, tapping into this infinite sense of power that comes out through your creativity. Boy, Pisces, that, and your voice, right? Coming from a place you may not have even really realized was there, right? Because you tap into something infinite in this space, and it is in a trine to the south node over in your realm of belief, but it's in a sextile to where the north node is pulling, again, in terms of it's time to brave the storm, right? What we have to do to face moving forward when we want to substantiate something in a physical way based on our subjective experience, right? So that is, and again, consciousness, your mind, learning, language, the landscape of your consciousness, and of course, the voice. There's something deep coming from here that you probably didn't even know is there, Pisces, but is going to be a big part of supporting the soul's journey, right? Very important as we come into, I think, coming into the equinox. So that's the 18th, the 19th, the 20th. Venus is going to trine Uranus retrograde again. This is where that swimming, right? That swimming race is now going to be something that is way more in the body, embodied, something that we feel a lot more in our physical feels, and our sensitivity to the form of the relationship in our physical feels, in our body, in our sense of value and worth, all of those things of Venus in a trine to Taurus, right? And so, again, the kinetic energy that is shifting the landscape of the consciousness of the Pisces person, what you think, what you know, what you think you know, and the new spontaneous energy that is really poised to really make its way out, but there's still stuff brewing under the surface in a lot of ways. Again, in the actual embodied, valued essence of the relationship, there is this motivation to really be the best version of yourself in this way that you can be at this point. So now we get to move into, and you can see this trine here as well. We move into the equinox, right, on the 22nd. And in fact, the moon is going to be opposite Saturn in Aquarius, boy, oh boy, and really in a T-square with Uranus. Wow. Wow. This is where there's a sensitivity to what the Pisces person really needs to, a sensitivity and a really, not a pressure, but kind of a intensity of how important it is for you to find your voice as part of like your works and your service, right? Leo in the 6th house, and surrender to yourself. Whereas in Saturn is just holding it down in the area of the ending, right? The endings or the collective unconscious or the realms of dreams and astral travel and imagination and fantasy, right? Well, there's no fantasy here with Saturn in this area, okay? It's a pretty strong crystallization of what is often in the subconscious. And it may be more of an internalized experience for the moment, but this moon opposition and the fact that Uranus is in a T-square, the ruler of Aquarius, in the 3rd house, I would say that it, maybe not really understanding fully, just having a sensitivity to this need to really identify and kind of find this way to worship this, not worship, but to really revere this part of yourself. It may not crystallize in the way that Saturn is just like, hey, I need, this sense of, it's, how do I say this? we need some sort of, it needs to, for the Pisces person, if it's not taking a form, and it is, I assure you, it is taking a form with Saturn here in the 12th, but if it's not taking a form, I think it's really difficult to understand exactly how to maybe emotionally manage your tasks, your everyday actions, the way that you take your voice and apply it to your everyday routines and practices and devotion. It's one thing to be devoted, and that's something that I think is part of the challenge for the Pisces person, is to find that soul, your heart's energy, and to put it into a works or a service. It's very, it's a lot of optimism here, and it's a lot of really self-conscious and self-aware type of energy in Leo, but it is Saturn that's like, well, it's got to have some type of form over here in the woo for you to even like pay attention to it. And again, it's something about Uranus in the third house, that energy that is under the surface of your own mind, that is moving around, that is creating space right now for something new to come up, the shifting of and the seismicity of your own neural pathways, your own networks in your mind, your own thoughts, and what you know and you learn and you think, how you communicate it. That I think is going to have a big impact as we are like about to move into the equinox, which is very late on the 22nd. So the 23rd, we're really coming into our balsamic moon now, because now the moon is in Virgo, the sun has moved into Libra, and Mercury in its retrograde is in this Cazimi, 0 degrees Libra. So without getting too much into the essence of Libra and what we're going to expect with this new moon, is just that the 0 degrees Libra point is really kind of the archetypal person, and the Sabian symbol is, a butterfly a butterfly that is impaled by a dart to show you know what I mean, that is displayed in a case. And I remember actually not that long ago, we were on a trip. We do a Mother's Day trip every year. Me and my sister-in-law, my sister, and my mom, we go to a new place. And so we were in Charleston. The things I felt there. And, the beaches in South Carolina as well. But we were in Charleston, and there's this really cool, market, this historical market that happens. That's like a farmer's market and a Saturday market. It's all these vendors, arts and crafts and all kinds of stuff. And there was someone who had, I don't even know why I'm telling this story, but it just reminded me of it. There was a person who made this type of art, right? These beautiful, these beautiful framed butterflies, and all kinds of art around with the butterflies. And my mom, in her Syrian way, right, and Pleiadian too, my gosh, she is just like, you could tell that she was so uncomfortable with it, because she was like, all these butterflies were harvested just to make this kind of stuff. And then this person had a sign right on their table that was just like, butterflies only have a lifespan of a number of days or weeks, and we only harvest them after, they had a huge, like, I don't know what you would call a butterfly, like sanctuary or some sort of like an aviary, but for butterflies. I know there's got to be a name. So they had one of these, and what they would do is just, they would grow them, they would cultivate them. They were free-range butterflies, but within this particular whatever their structure was. I don't know exactly what it was. But then when they passed away and they reached the end of their life cycle, then they would harvest them, and then they would create these art pieces and stuff like that. So then she was like, oh, okay, you didn't actually kill them in order to make this art piece. This, when you see and visualize something like that, this is 0 degrees Libra, and it's meant to be this perfect form, because the butterfly does represent metamorphosis, right? And the metamorphosis has already happened and has been offered up to up to relationship. And in this case, it shows like the full wingspan and all of its glory in like one snapshot, and that's like the distilled version of Libra. And you can look at it even more so as like the crucifixion on the cross, right? Not to get too biblical about it, but geez, we're talking about Pisces here, right? So I mean, if there was an avatar of the age of Pisces, if we're going to go into that, it's definitely the Christ, the Virgo Pisces axis. So Libra, that 0 degrees, is like, this is the perfect form, the sacred person, the sacred balance of perfected, ripening, ripe, mature form, and the harvest, right? The fruit is given over to be consumed, to be given away, in order for the seed to be disseminated into the next cycle, right? That is 0 degrees Libra. So for Mercury and the Sun to come in conjunction here, right on your 8th house cusp, Pisces, is giving incredible amount of inner light, right? It is like the sun shining right through Mercury, right to us, giving us a message right into our inner self, right? Into our own inner consciousness about ourself, of what this balance is in the realm of power dynamics, of shared resources, communion, sharing, cooperation, occult power, your subconscious, the death and rebirth, right? All of the perfect form of it is illuminated in such a way at this equinox. Wow. And from there, we truly are in our balsamic moon phase, where everything is very dark. It's very still. We just kind of sit with the reduced energy of this whole lunar cycle that has to do with you and Virgo, Pisces. And the moon has now moved into your 7th house and will, transit that entire 7th house until the new moon, which is in 3 degrees Libra. So you also are going to have Venus will be in opposition to Neptune right as we're leading up to this point, in that same degree of, actually it's now moved 23 to 24 Pisces, which is much more about the way that we centralize our own dharma in a collective situation to maximize our potential, right? Being realistic about our limitations, right? Because this is about endings, right? This is about coming full circle and being like, this is what's worked, this is what hasn't worked, this is where my strengths are, my weaknesses are, my mistakes, my successes, and everything coming around and be like, oh, this is my dharma, is this process unfolding. That degree of Pisces, Neptune, for Neptune, and for you, Pisces, wow, is so much different than the deluge of the purification and catharsis at a fundamentally transcendental level. And Venus here in Virgo, opposite of this innocence, right? Being like, Mary and her little lamb, which is definitely a nursery rhyme that is telling a story about the Mary and Jesus coupling, right? And the lamb being, the Aries, right? The beginning, the seed, Mary and her little lamb, Mary and the seed. Oh my gosh. So there's a sense of innocence and be as little children. Be ye be as little children, right? This is this degree. There's a sense of innocence, not naive, but innocent, like going back to this childlike nature. And it's very much this going back to this kind of maiden phase of the divine feminine in some ways. And I think this opposition right before the new moon in Libra is again bringing this into the the physical sense-based feels and your sense of value and worth in relationship. I think that this is really going to soften some edges quite a bit in ways that need to be softened, right? I mean, Pisces, if you've just let everything wash over you, then you might be forced back into feeling like a little child in some ways, so that you can be way more realistic about your dharma and who you are. But I would say that most of us that are probably watching this and engaging with at least the work I'm doing or on their own path of spiritual evolution and self-discovery are most likely going to come to that sense of innocence and a willingness to approach relationships from a very playful and pure type of sense. And when you do that, I think that that's going to help really find the fulcrum in terms of you and who you are in your relationship. And since the moon will be moving through Virgo at this time, then you're really sensitive to the dynamics as well, and like your discernment and how you're going to organize yourself emotionally. And then we come into the new moon on the 25th, right? 3 degrees Libra, and the moon will have a connection over to Pluto. And by the time we get to this point, then we're going to start talking about eclipses again. We're going to start talking about the whole season from the equinox to the solstice. And we're in a completely different season. And things are really going to be about resources for you, Pisces, when it gets to that point. But you got to get you on lockdown first in a good way, right? You need to get really real with yourself and really know yourself in relationship, in a way that is discerning between you and others. So you, again, can maximize you as being a Pisces. Neptune in Pisces only happens once every 165 years, right? That is how long it takes, for a full revolution. So less than that, right? Because it moves through the whole sign of Pisces. So the last time Neptune was here in Pisces was 19th century, 1859, the Carrington event. After that, it was the Civil War in the U.S. After that was the establishment of the Federal Reserve in the U.S. And, we go from there, right? You can start to see that theosophy, anthroposophy start coming online from the 19th, 20th century. Nikola Tesla was born in the 19th century, right? So there's a lot here, Pisces, that is also bringing your sense of self also back to those times as well, and back, and taking away all of, it's important to be able to identify oneself with the collective unconscious. And this is why Pisces people are incredible healers and artists, and imagination is just primary for them, and a sense of oneness, right? But it's essential that you know the difference between you and other while you're here at Earth School, because otherwise that is why we're here. And that is, the Virgo principle was the Jesus and Mary principle. The Christ principle is the Pisces, right? The returning back to and being one with Source. So Pisces, I think that's all I have for you on this report for today. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. So I am going to just share real quick in terms of promotional material. I just want to let you know that if you are a Pisces rising, Pisces moon, Pisces sun, and you are interested in how the rest of this lunar cycle is going to be impacting you, what areas of life they may be impacting, and what to look out for, maybe certain starseed markings. The lunar transit forecast is available for you at the sale rate, 30 minutes or 60 minutes. Recorded reading based on your own lunar chart, based on your own natal chart, maybe your progressions, your starseed markings, whatever seems relevant to really the rest of this lunar cycle. Certainly, if you have a longer reading, we can look at the whole lunar cycle, maybe look up past the equinox. It's really up to you, but I offer these sales for the signs represented each month, representing the lunar cycle. So Pisces, you can go to catalystenergies.net and just book right from the website if you are interested in doing that. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Pisces, I will see you on the Friday broadcast on 9/9 if you choose to be there, making sure you subscribe and hit the notifications so you know when I am streaming live on YouTube, and certainly when you are subscribed on the other platforms, then you know when I upload videos. So take care, everyone. Thank you, Pisces, for being here. Thank you for being you, truly. And I will see you next time. Bye.